Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Digital Future Lab. We are streaming here today with our main sound designers here. So they're all super awesome. They make great music and sound design for our games here. A game that we're going to be expoing here, not expoing. I'm forgetting more words. Well, we're going to be at Emerald City Comic Con, and we have our new game, Seed. Still working on it. It's an original spin-off of Tower Defense games, where instead of hurting the little dudes walking on the path, you kind of help them out and get to the end. So that's going to be there, Emerald City Comic Con. Be there. So here we have our audio team. We'll go around and do introductions. So I'll go first. I'm Kris. I use they, them pronouns. And I do narrative design, and I did a little audio design in my early years.
I'm Nicola. I'm an audio engineer here at the DFL, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm a music composer at the DFL. I use she, her pronouns, and this is my second quarter.
Hello, my name is Ethan, and I'm a musical composer here at the Digital Future Lab, here for my first quarter, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
Awesome, great. So we have a whole bunch of fantastic people here today. So we're just gonna jump right into our questions. So one of our first kind of like general questions we have for you guys is, how is sound important in video games?
That's a big one.
Yeah. Well, we can get into the nitty gritty, but kind of like in general, why would it be so important to have like sound?
Well, I think one, I guess, more obvious thing is that sound does help give games direction. Visuals are definitely very important, but once visuals and sound work together, then I feel like a player can understand the task much better. And I think that playing a game with no sound is just not as enjoyable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like sound kind of helps cue the player. It kind of lets you know if you're going in the right direction, lets you know if you're like on the right path, or even like if you're going in the wrong direction, or maybe if something big is coming up. Like in a lot of video games, like the theme changes if there's like a big boss battle coming up, and it kind of gives you that auditory cue to like prepare yourself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, my favorite part, like the thing you just talked about, one of my favorite games, Shadow of the Colossus, fantastic game, PS4, PS3. When you begin to like succeed, the music just changes. Like that dynamic music system is awesome, and it's just like, yes.
Let's see, for me, I guess the music is important to me because it's just another dimension to video games that you just think of, because then you can remember when you were fighting this ancient boss or just maybe grinding, but then you'll think back so much later, and then like my memories usually tend to go towards the noise that helped capture every single detail that happened. Just, I don't know, even through say Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, I still remember I still remember Cynthia's theme, and I remember being terrified because I'd never seen a Spiritomb, and Spiritomb, they should have just called that just the fear of my life. Anyways, yeah.
Oh man, yeah, like there's so many fantastic moments. Like another great example that I super love is in the Zelda games, Wind Waker especially, because I was a kid too, so I played that as a kid. That was like my first Zelda game. When you hit the enemies and get combos, there's like orchestra hits that time up with the music in the background, and it's just, that's the good stuff. Oh man, it's great. So, kind of moving in the same direction, how do you match the sound to sound in the game? So like certain sound effects to match the theme of Seed. So like when the player does something, what sound occurs? So how do you do that?
Well, I think from me personally, from more of an effects background or an effects sort of looking for standpoint, I think that for Seed I get more of a almost like a tribal sort of feel to it, so I kind of orient the sound effects that I create towards that.
Yeah, so like something more organic.
Yeah. So I kind of use, like, for instance, like I would use instruments that sound kind of within that realm. So maybe like a deeper sounding drum, or sometimes play around with a little bit of like cymbal work. But yeah, I definitely get more with Seed. I definitely get more of like this kind of like tribal feel. So that's kind of what I aim for. That's how I match all of my sounds. I make sure like, is that what I think of when I hear that sound, and then it's kind of how I know.
Cool, cool. And you do a lot of composition. So how is that side a little different from like the sound effects side?
Yeah, so the composition side, also like a lot of like tribal stuff and a lot of drums, but like our pieces are usually a little more drawn out, so usually like a lot more like emotional instruments like strings, woodwinds, stuff like that, so it sounds more dynamic, kind of like a film score. Definitely a lot of like drums and earthy sounds and tribal stuff.
That's cool, yeah.
Let's see. I guess to add to the composition, I don't know. A lot of it was pretty well covered. Again, the tribal percussion is just so strong because we have all these preconceived notions of associations with music and what is tribal, such as the drums, violin as well. Just because that gets into that tarantella sort of feel that you were going for before with other themes. So. Again, just associations that build the game and that relate what we know in music in the real world to something completely out of our depth that we can't really imagine.
Yeah, that's kind of deep, bro. Not gonna lie. Anyways, so let's see. So one of the big questions we were talking about even earlier before this, how does sound and narrative kind of work together?
Well, I think that when we think about, sometimes when I think about narrative, I also think about emotion, I guess. So sound, I feel like, also helps drive the emotions that the designers were kind of aiming for people to feel. So I think that that's like one big thing, as well as the fact that, for instance, like sound effects and even musical compositions can help guide players through the story in more of a directional way. But I think emotion, creating like emotion for the narrative, is like very important with sound.
Yeah, I think like what Nicola said, the emotion is really important, and sound kind of helps with that connection. It kind of helps bridge the connection to like the player with the story. It helps them kind of feel more like immersed in the story. And like with our dynamic music system, it kind of makes you feel like you're actually like in the story, in the environment. You're not just a bystander. You're actually like a resident in like the world of Seed.
Yeah, that's like exactly from like the narrative side of thing. That's like exactly the kind of stuff we're looking for. So
I think I was thinking more about some of the sounds that Nicola was talking about, and right, he covered about how we're trying to convey the narrative's purpose, or at least like what the developers are aiming for in terms of the emotions. But I think there's also just so much power in even like the smallest of sounds, especially with the dynamic music system. That has to be very universal and yet still guide towards like a unifying purpose, which is, it's hard to imagine just that we can make all these general sounds so versatile. I think is the important thing in all circumstances in what we do. So
yeah, that's great. Like one of my favorite kind of narrative driven games is Nier, not Automata, the new one, but the one that came before it, just felt fantastic soundtrack, fantastic vocals, everything's fantastic. But I think the thing that makes it stand out to me is how I can just like sit down and listen to the tracks, just the musical compositions, and like understand the story and understand what's going on. And it's just like, that's what separates good music from great music. Like in my mind, that's how you do it good. All right. So, well, a little more personal. How did you get your role as a composer, composer
Composition.
composer or audio engineer?
I mean, I feel like, I sort of fell into the world of sound more from a music standpoint. I mean, I started more with music, but then after taking a few classes based more in editing sound, I kind of found my way there. And then after kind of hearing about the Digital Future Lab here on the Bothell campus for the UW, I thought it was just kind of natural. So I applied and I got it.
Yeah, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Awesome time.
Thanks. How did I fall into my role? Well, I've always been interested in composition ever since I was little. I didn't really know how to play the piano, so I wrote my own songs instead. And then in high school, I started looking at it as a career. So composition is actually what I study. And then I found out about the Digital Future Lab, and I'm like, hey, I'm interested in video games and composition. Like, working there would be perfect. So that's how I got here.
Nice. Yeah, when I was a kid, my parents would make me take piano lessons, but I hated them. And now I regret it because now I really wish I played piano. Oh, man.
My parents were quite the opposite. They didn't want me to feel forced to be anything. And then I found my hands on the piano for the first time, and then they had their head in their hands because they realized a missed opportunity, and I still rip them on that to this very day. So I started off more classical, but it wasn't, I don't know, I was picking up music more passively, so I just knew that there was music out there I loved, but I didn't know how to grasp it. And then one day that question just came to me: what if I can play this song from this video game? I didn't consider it even a song at that point because, like, again, it was something that I hadn't even noticed. So once I found out that there was an entire community, all these sheets and scores for video game music, I just became so thrilled to find out that, like, there was this piece of music that existed that could connect with my memories of video games. And that's how I came here. I found out, and I absolutely had to come.
Well, we're really glad all of you are here today. Kind of like as a fun side question, what instruments did you guys play when you were little? So I played French horn and clarinet.
Okay. Well, let's see. I started playing an instrument when I was like a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
So I feel like I started a little bit later. But I started with piano, moved my way to guitar, and then I picked up percussion, I think near the end of my senior year, and I really kind of fell in love with that a bit more. So that's kind of been my more mainstay instrument.
Yeah, no, like, when you find that voice, it's just
yeah.
Like, it's like the fucking the like, I don't know what to describe it. It's like Harry Potter. Like, the wand chooses the wizard, whatever.
Yeah.
The instrument chooses the musician. Like, when I heard French horn for the first time, I was like, that's my instrument.
Yeah.
I've played percussion for around like 9 or 10 years. I started out in like a marimba band,
Nice.
which was really fun. So that was a fun start into the world of percussion. I don't really play drum set. I might learn one day, but I'm mostly like a mallet person, and I'm trying to learn the keyboard, so we'll see.
Mallet and keyboard are related, so we'll get there.
Yeah.
Let's see, for me, I've only really done the piano, unless you count the recorder, but I'm pretty sure that's most of us. And that was very quickly dropped. But the piano, that was for about 8.5 years so far, and still going strong. I picked up the ukulele, and I want to learn more about the guitar. I really want to just switch through a lot of genres, but that's for another question. So.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's just like jump right into it. What's your favorite genre? Let's see. I can't decide my favorite genre. I have way too many. But do you guys have any? Well, let's see. Let's narrow down the question. What's your favorite genre to write, and what's your favorite genre to play?
Mm-hmm.
So I think my favorite genre to write would probably be like ballads and stuff. Those are my favorite. And I think my favorite to play, I think, I was a born and raised band kid. I have to say marches. John Phillips is my patron. So that's what I was raised with. I think I'll have to go with marches or some sort of dances.
I think for me, when it comes to music, I mean, I like pretty much everything.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, I think that if it's good, no matter what genre it's in. But I have to say my preference probably lies more within rock.
Yeah.
Generally heavier. I will admit I am a metalhead.
Nice.
And I think when I do come up with music on my guitar or the drums, it usually is that genre. So I think writing and playing it's kind of my favorite genre in general to mess around with.
Yeah, awesome. It's always good to have variety. You can't. I get tired if I just listen to the same stuff over and over. So.
Yeah. I usually like to write kind of. I guess I would say kind of classical. I don't know. Maybe it's more contemporary. I'm not really sure. I'm still kind of finding my voice in what I like to write. What I like to play. I definitely agree with the marching band music.
It's great.
Yeah, I used to be in drumline in high school, which was like one of the best things I've ever done.
Okay, just quick question, sidebar. Did you ever watch the really silly movie, the drumline movie, the one that everyone hates?
Yeah.
Is that with what's his face?
I forgot, but it's the one that literally, if you talk to any marching band kid, they're like, "Oh yeah, that movie sucks." It's the one where the kid doesn't know how to read music, but like he learns how to play by ear.
Wasn't that Nick Cannon?
I think
That was Nick
it
Cannon.
was. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember
Anyways,
It was pretty awful.
we went on a little tangent, but.
I think I forgot the question now.
What's your favorite music to write, and what's your favorite music to play?
Okay. That's a bit hard for me because then I consider playing different from improvising, because I like to improvise different things than what I like to play. But in terms of listening, I guess I like to listen to cocktail jazz and video game music.
Yeah.
In terms of writing, probably a mix of contemporary and video game music.
Cocktail jazz.
Yeah.
Cocktail jazz. I've never heard of that before. Is it like what's it? Is it like noir or is it like?
It's like, imagine cosmopolitan New York. You're up in a bar or something like that, and then like you're having a nice martini as like someone is just waiting. You can imagine the piano just in the back, like just going very light, and then like you know. I don't know.
That was a very vivid picture.
Oh my God.
Does that help? It's like,
Yeah, I think I could. It's just I've never heard of that. Huh.
I want to also learn how to improvise it.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading a couple books at the moment that help me with it.
Improvising piano?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
So, a lot of it's just like arpeggios, which I need to like get my fingers to learn a bit better.
Okay, yeah. Arpeggios and scales are like my biggest weakness.
They're fun if you can get your fingers to do that, but unfortunately, that's been gifted mostly to my left hand.
You see, with French horn, we have 3 buttons. So it's easy. 4 if you're lucky and you get a double for it.
Well, let's see. I want to add in some 9s in there too, just because my hands can. But
Wow.
Okay, I covered listening, writing, and then in terms of playing, I love to play particularly with the old style Mario music, the ragtime.
Oh, that stuff's super fun.
I loved playing that. Athletic Theme was one of them. Super Mario World 2, one of my favorite games of all time, just because it was also my first. And then in terms of improvising, I like jazz and contemporary.
Cool.
I'm sorry. And blues.
Blues, yeah.
I'm sorry, that's long.
No, it's good. It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. All right, so the next question, let's see. So what's kind of the creative process for when you're making sound effects or if you're writing a composition?
Well, I think for me, when I'm creating or I'm assigned a task for a certain sound effect, for instance, like within Seed, I generally just do a lot of experimenting. It's mainly, obviously I have the theme in mind, like I was stating before, when matching a sound to Seed. So obviously I know that has to fall within a certain scope. For instance, like that maybe more tribal aspect. But also do like a good deal of research. So I might look at other games that have like the similar sound, like for instance in Seed, when you have the Tolly coming out of the portal, I guess it's labeled the incoming wave. So there might be, there are other games that have a similar, not the same sound, but there needs to be a sound that
like some sort of similar
signals
concept.
that. Yeah. So I may go and look at that. I may listen to what other people have created, and just kind of get an idea, and then play around with different samples, and maybe even some live recordings of something that I think sounds good.
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah, definitely.
He's also been pretty helpful for us composers, because then I think I asked Nicola for a sound sample, or I wasn't sure what to do about getting this particular sound, but I think he managed to isolate what I was looking for pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes.
All right, so for more composition-focused stuff, how does that kind of process go? Because I know from my own kind of experience, it's hard. Oh man.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get going sometimes. A lot of experimenting too on the composition side. If I'm kind of stuck, I'll usually pick one of my favorite kind of scales, usually C minor, and then just kind of start messing around in that, and then see if I get a melody, and then go from there.
Cool.
Let's see. Yeah, that's basically me. It's always experimenting. Granted, I don't think I have the same pedigree as you do, so there's probably a lot more feeling in the mix.
No, it's all just different ways how your mind thinks. So for some people it's I just gotta experiment with everything until I find what I'm looking for. Some people it's okay, I'm gonna return to what's familiar, and then I'm gonna build off of that. So there's so many different ways to write music.
I think in particular for me it's a lot of meditation, which I don't know if that makes sense, because then the experimenting for me comes more from I close my eyes and then I put myself in the scene, and then I guess my mind already fills it in already, because then we have that expectation kind of ingrained within us, or maybe I've just been brainwashed. But yeah, so then is transposing based on what I hear in my head.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I listen. My head is always going on some tune or another.
Yeah.
But finding music in silence, that's really cool. Let's see, what is our other questions? How do you keep... Oh, this is kind of a complicated question. But how do you keep continuity through your songs without falling into redundant repetition? So I know you probably know the A, B, C, B, A pattern, those kinds of loops that we generally follow, but what kind of loops do you generally do, and fitting that into tempo, octave, and instruments and stuff?
Ooh, what loops?
The other thing we need to keep in mind is that video game music does loop. So if you look at any video game composition track, it doesn't have a beginning or an end really, because it loops back again. So that's always been my biggest struggle, is figuring out how to get that full loop without it feeling like there's a structured beginning and structured end. So
yeah, that's kind of been one of the problems I've been facing. How do I make the ending not really an ending? I usually start with somewhat of a beginning, and I kind of make the ending to kind of smoothly transition back into the beginning when it loops. And then there'll just be this middle section that's kind of fun. Yeah, still working on that. trying to make it not too redundant. I try to use the same like core instruments like strings and stuff. I use a lot of like vocal stuff too, because I think the choirs sound really cool and they
Yeah.
kind of fit with Seed. So that kind of keeps with the continuity stuff. Not making it redundant. You just kind of have to try to go for newish ideas. Every
Yeah,
time.
I think what the question is asking, because it's kind of vague, but like different tracks. How do you like make sure that each track is unique in its own way?
Oh, okay.
You're on the spot.
Well, not just you. Anybody can answer. So like, even if
you-
it's like rock music, it doesn't have to be just Seed.
Yeah.
Let's see. So like basically keeping all the tracks unified, but then also different. You're saying?
Yeah. So like,
Okay.
there's definitely we've talked so many times like as a kind of like audio design team about having like variations on a theme. I think we had like a whole day where we just listened to Lord of the Rings music and we like picked out like each character's theme and saw how they fit into like the entire like music track. That was super fun. But like, how do you guys kind of manage those concepts of like, there's this unification of the whole product, but there's also like individuality within each track?
I think actually we did talk a bit about this in general. Like core instrumentation was one of the things that Jordan mentioned, where we just make sure to have common instruments between each other so that it's like we use the same kit, I suppose, if that makes sense. But then also like connects it with those associations that I was mentioning earlier, which Jordan also mentioned is just like connecting those thoughts together, two in one. But in terms of making it different, though, I think a lot of it comes into more of introducing new ideas of how we use those instruments. Like, do we go for, I guess, like with the Blight theme, we tried to elaborate more with silence. Spoiler alert, but yeah. So more silence in that case with the instruments that we're using and stretching what we know we can do with music, generally speaking, and fitting the instruments to use those in a different way. It's kind of like when you're asked a question. I actually have a paperclip right here, but
Oh my god.
how many different ways can we use a paperclip? I guess would be another way of saying it. So same core kit, but then different ways of using it.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And then how does that kind of fit into sound effect design? So like, how do you make all these sound effects fit into the same universe, but also like they're very unique for unique like events or a unique item?
Well, it's kind of goes back to what they were saying, where you kind of have like this this little like briefcase of sounds that you know work in the game. So you kind of just, it's okay, I think, with sound effects to have some of like the same sounding things, as long as they have a different, like, you can kind of put a different meaning to them. Like, you can tweak like really slightly one sound and it could mean like something completely different. So I think it's okay that, to use the same samples or the same sounds, as long as they're not, I mean, obviously you wouldn't have like a start sound the same as an end sound sometimes. So I think it's it's just about using what works, and then just doing these kind of minor tweaks and seeing how that works. So I think it is okay when you use kind of like some of the same sounds.
Yeah. So like, kind of like piggybacking off of that, how does that like the using the same sounds kind of help push like certain themes or certain ideas?
I think it helps the player get more immersed, because I think if I'm using like a drum or something for one sound, and then all of a sudden like you get this like weird other instrument out of nowhere, like maybe because I feel like in Seed we don't really use a lot of horns, right?
No.
Yeah, there's like no horns. So like if there was like a trumpet thrown in there somewhere, like all of a sudden like people would be like kind of taken out of it. So I think I think that's like a big part of it. too. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, how does that? So I mean, we already kind of talked about variations on the theme, but how does that kind of like? I mean, I kind of explained, but how are we using variations on a theme in Seed, for example?
Yeah. So we haven't done it kind of yet exactly. The new audio team. But like Khan is another one of our audio engineers and composers, and like he's working on like kind of the main menu selection theme right now. And then Jason, our studio director, is talking about like we're gonna like take that theme and then kind of like tweak it and use it in other places sometimes. So for like variation, sometimes I feel like it helps to get like another perspective, maybe like have another composer come in and help kind of like change up the theme a little bit, or maybe like Ethan was saying, not use different instruments but change how the instruments are used, or how they play, or something like changing the tempo slightly, or like changing the octave, maybe changing the key depending on like the situation.
Or even just like switching one of the chords that we use with maybe a minor chord or something like that. 'Cause
Yeah.
then, like,
Yeah,
that'll-
definitely.
yeah.
All right. So, I think we're nearing the end here. What challenges do you guys face as like audio engineers and composers usually? So like, what is your biggest challenge?
We're gonna get some tears up in here.
Oh man.
I think what is sometimes not seen as a challenge would be maybe like this sort of like you're left to kind of be as creative as you want.
Oh, okay. So like,
if that makes sense. So if it's like
the vastness, like the openness of it.
I guess maybe ambiguity and having a large amount of freedom can sometimes be a challenge, because then you kind of are just like, okay, where do I start sometimes. I think that's definitely one challenge that I sometimes run into, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you kind of just really put your mind to it, you'll be able to figure out what you should be doing. And then obviously feedback from other people really helps too. That's I think once you like create one thing and you're like, okay, well, I wasn't necessarily given like a bunch of constraints or restrictions, and you create it and then you let other people listen to it and then they're like, that doesn't work, then you're like, okay, I'll change it. So you can kind of get on a different path if you might not have started on the right one.
Yeah, I agree. Not always having super clear starting point has kind of been like a barrier sometimes. We're usually given like a theme to match, but it's like, I don't know if my music's gonna match this theme until I like create something and get feedback for it. Then it's like, okay, this is kind of going on the right track, or like, okay, I need to like revisit this and go in a different direction. So you don't really know if you're gonna match the theme until you just like create something that you're like, this might work.
I think for me, I'm still struggling, I guess, like with some of the basic levels, just with harmony and melody. Having more than one instrument aside from just the piano. Again, it's like an open door, I guess, as Nicola said. But I think something else just is, again, that transposing thing that I was mentioning before, because then, like, how do you get the sound that you're looking for? So.
Yeah, those are all like really, really big things, but like also like really important things. So I think that's what really makes like audio unique, is because like it's so vast and it's wild sometimes, but it's fantastic at the same time. So, man, I remember hearing like rumors of some sort of like 3D audio system that we're working on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
What kind of secrets have you been keeping from us?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we're working on implementing a dynamic music system. So basically the audio would adapt in game depending on how the player's doing, and kind of like depending on where you are in the map or how close you are to finishing the ritual in Seed. So it's in the works.
It's in the works. All right, fantastic. Let me see. Well, I mean, we can I think we went through all the questions we had printed out, but we can just talk a little bit more. So what's your biggest influence on, like, I think who's your biggest influencer on, like, to get into music, into writing your music? So, like, yeah. Who inspires you the most in music? Is a big question, but
I think I got 2 people so far.
2 people?
Yeah.
All right, let's hear 'em.
The first one was, they're all Japanese, by the way, but Tomohito Nishida, he is the person who helped inspire me for Professor Layton. Because then it showed me a different side of, it was classical but not classical. I forget the name of the genre that they used with it, but it was so fitting, I guess, for Professor Layton.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one that helped influence me in terms of my compositioner beliefs was Koji Kondo, just because of
Fantastic.
yes,
Beautiful.
yes,
Wonderful.
it's, I don't know, it's something so, sure we like doom and gloom nowadays, I feel like, but there's something nice about it. He's like the Disney composer in some sense.
Mhm.
So
Influence. Man, I guess from like a musical standpoint, it would probably just have to be different bands that I listen to. They don't really apply to games
It doesn't have to
as
be
much,
games, it
but
just has to be anything.
let's see. I guess in terms of rock, I mean, I usually really do get inspired by, for instance, different drummers. For instance, what's his? Man, I can't remember his name now, but the drummer for Tool. I don't. Do you guys know that? No. Okay. Well, whatever. They're really check him out. He's really incredible. And I think I get inspired by people that look like they just put a lot of emotion into what they do, and I always kind of strive to do that. That and like the Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters.
Taylor Hawkins is really good. Yeah, just
Yeah, like
I can
just
be
kinda-
influenced by everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of our existence is influence and in being influenced and influencing. But like, yeah, I kind of get where you come from.
Mhm.
Like composers and musicians that have like that like spark or something that's like really they love what they're doing. I think that's something
Mhm.
really inspirational.
Yeah, for me, one of the big composers is probably Hans Zimmer.
Yes. Oh my god.
I love him so much.
He's like a wizard. He's so good.
I read something. He like didn't watch a movie till he was like 11 or 12, and here he is like just composing these like amazing film scores.
That's. I didn't know that. What the heck?
Yeah, I don't know how
Damn.
he does it. So he's definitely like an inspiration of like this is like the top of like what you could be. Like
Oh,
he's
yeah.
just like amazing.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
oh, by the way, 2 shout outs, I think. One to JC, probably.
Oh yeah. JC is
Yes.
the audio lead now, or is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, audio lead in DFL. A lot of our folks kind of like hop around positions. So like I was audio, now I'm narrative. I did do a whole bunch of other stuff too, but
So that's the first shout out. The other one that I believe my uncle showed me that I think is actually rather inspiring for me in video game music composing is the Rippingtons. They're not video game music, but they do a really good job with ambience.
that's awesome. I need to check that out. I need to check all these guys out. I think the one moment that really got me into music is that, so I live really close to my high school. So when I was like a tiny little gremlin in diapers or whatever, we'd hear the band playing like off in the distance, and I was like, whoa, what's that? That's so cool. And then when I was in high school, I joined the band, and it was like, now we're the ones making the noise. So there's also this sense of like, I don't know, like community within it. So like, I don't know, it's pretty powerful stuff. Let's see, what else can we? Let's see. What's an instrument that you want to learn? I know we talked about this a little bit, but something that you want to learn can be something like strange or can be something like normal or something like that. Like, what's the weird like Australian one?
Oh, the didgeridoo.
Didgeridoo, yeah. I had one guy in my class just want to play the didgeridoo so bad. I don't know, but I mean, credit to him wherever he is.
It looks fun.
It does.
I want to learn to play like a string instrument, like the viola or the cello. Mm-hmm. They both sound so beautiful.
Cello is so good. I think, well, for some reason, string instruments hate me. I can't play guitar. I've tried, but it's just, I don't have like the finger dexterity for it. But they sound so beautiful. Yeah, like cello and bass are like, so, I don't know, there's like this like, they're very good. They're very like smooth, like chocolate.
Yeah.
Let's see. For me, I did mention the guitar, but I guess other things. Not the violin though, because I think I had a seizure when I did one of those. Medical reasons, but.
Oh okay.
Anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, medical.
Oof, okay, yeah. We don't have to talk about that.
Yeah. But I think one thing that this is Professor Layton inspired, but. Music box, like if there's any sort of way to find an instrument that sounds like that, I guess that would be really cool.
I think there's like
kalimba,
maybe like something like maybe like glockenspiel, something like one of those tiny little guys.
Yeah, if I can use one of those, that'd be really nice, because then I think it's ominous, but it's sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But it's also just one of those takes you back to your childhood moments, which is part of why it's ominous, because childhood's scary. But yeah.
Oh my god. Did you have anything to add?
I'd probably like to learn how to play like the hammer dulcimer. If you know what I'm talking about.
Enlighten me.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. It looks really scary. Like
oh my God.
To learn. I don't know how you do it, but I mean I don't know how to describe it. It's percussion, but also string.
Also strings.
I mean, because it works kind of like a piano with the
with the hammers.
Okay.
But you're actually like
you're
using
actually
the hammers.
Oh, that's cool.
But like the way that I've seen people play it, like the way because it's like kind of big, or at least you can get like pretty big ones. It's like the way they like glide across it. But I've generally heard it more with what's the word? Like medieval music.
That
So
one.
it's
That
kind of-
instrument. That's what it's called.
Maybe.
I
don't
think
know.
it's the one that's like always in like the medieval fantasy movies.
But the only problem is that does not look very portable.
Yeah.
Try the piano.
Oh my gosh.
It's
But you
not
can buy electric ones. You can't buy an electric hammer dulcimer that I'm aware of.
That's such a funny name.
We need to like invent some sort of invention that like is like the Omni instrument that can turn
The
into
Omni
whatever.
instrument. That's
Yeah.
that's a synthesizer, bro.
No, I mean like I always.
synthesizer, bro.
I mean, like, you know, the last Guardians of Sandman, I was thinking, like, if you could somehow have something that could change shape into whatever you wanted to.
Oh man.
That would be something I'd use it.
like a pocket trombone or something.
You could use it for world domination for all I care. I just want to be able to, like, carry my piano in my pocket.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so fun. I was such a nerd in high school. Like, we were on the bus to go to band camp and I was bored, so I drew a piano keyboard on my notebook. And I would pretend I was practicing. Because I was bored and it was a 2-hour drive to go to like Fort Flagler or whatever. Like, oof. But had fun. It was great. Played piano on the way. Man, that was fun. Let's see.
I think it's okay to segue out too.
Yeah,
if you wanted
I think we're just about wrapped up here. I don't have any more ideas in my head. So just gonna say thank you everybody out there for joining us here today. Again, DFL Digital Future Lab here on UW Bothell campus. Just want to have a big thank you to all of our panelists here, and then all our team behind the camera that you can't see. Thank you guys so much for setting up everything. I don't know a thing about computers. Yeah, so just once again, make sure we're going to be at Emerald City Comic Con. Check us out. Seed is the game. Games are a game. Something like that. Make sure to check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter page. So I think we're going to have that linked in the chat. Be sure to check those out. And I guess we'll see you guys next time. All right.
Bye.
Bye.